Her ex said no one would ever love a barren woman. But when a widowed millionaire watched her teach his children how to hope again, he realized, love doesn't need blood to build a family. The smell of cinnamon and sugar still clung to the walls long after Lydia Moore had locked the bakery door for the final time. She stood on the sidewalk, keys heavy in her palm, watching as the for-lease sign caught the morning light. 5 years of sleepless nights, of batter-splattered aprons and dreams that never quite rose the way she hoped. And now it was gone, sold to pay off the last of the business loans her ex-fiancé had promised to help with before he'd left her for a woman carrying his child. Lydia traced the gold band-shaped mark still faint on her ring finger. "It's just skin," she whispered, forcing a breath that tasted like old promises. Then she straightened, tucked the keys into an envelope, and slid it under the door for the realtor. Life had to move on, even when it didn't ask permission. Across town, the elevator doors opened to the penthouse floor of Cole Enterprises. Ethan Cole loosened his tie, balancing a phone on one shoulder while flipping through a stack of reports. Yes, increase the bid. No, not the aggressive option, steady growth. He paused. And please, cancel the dinner reservation. I'll be home for the kids. The assistant on the other end hesitated. Sir, that's the third investor dinner you've canceled this month. I'm aware, he said, and ended the call. Outside his office window, the Chicago skyline glowed with early winter light. It was beautiful and lonely, much like the man who owned half of it. On his desk sat a framed photo of his late wife, Claire, laughing in a summer dress beside their 2 children, Ella, 8, and Noah, 5. Ethan brushed a thumb across the glass, guilt flickering like static. Daddy. A small voice drifted from the doorway. He looked up. Ella stood there, ballet shoes in one hand, a folded recital flyer in the other. Miss Patel said parents have to bring cupcakes for the bake sale tomorrow. Ethan blinked. Cupcakes. She nodded seriously. Pink ones. It's for the dance school fundraiser. He smiled faintly. Then pink it is. When she left, he exhaled. Cupcakes. Board meetings he could handle. Cupcakes were another language entirely. That same afternoon, Lydia found herself scrolling through job listings at a corner cafe. The sweet smell of espresso almost masked the ache of uncertainty. The barista slid her a flyer. You're the cupcake queen, right? They're looking for a local baker for the kids' fundraiser tomorrow. Good exposure. Lydia almost laughed. Exposure didn't pay rent, but pride had already cost her too much. Sure, she said, taking the flyer. Why not? The next morning, the school gym buzzed with laughter, music, and the rustle of tiny ballerinas. Lydia set up her booth, icing swirling over trays of pink velvet cupcakes. She wore her favorite blue sweater, her little rebellion against feeling invisible. Across the room, Ethan Cole was trying to balance 2 juice boxes, a diaper bag, and his own composure. His youngest, Noah, tugged at his sleeve. Daddy, the frosting fell off my cupcake. Ethan sighed, scanning the tables until he saw a woman quietly fixing a tray. Her hands moved like art, steady, sure, gentle. Excuse me, he said, approaching. Do you happen to sell cupcake repairs? Lydia looked up, startled. Her eyes were soft brown, tired but kind. I charge double for emergencies, she said. But I'll make an exception. He smiled, a real one, rare as it was. As she replaced the ruined frosting, Noah watched in awe. You made it new again. Cupcakes are like people, Lydia said. A little care, a little sweetness, and they're good as new. Ethan glanced at her, something unspoken passing between them. Thank you, he said quietly. I'm Ethan. Lydia. They shook hands, brief, warm, electric. Throughout the event, Ethan kept noticing her laugh, the way she knelt to talk to kids at their level, how she seemed to glow when no one was looking. When the music started for the recital, Lydia found herself seated beside him in the front row. As the children danced, he leaned over. My daughter's the one on the right, the serious face. I can tell, Lydia whispered, smiling. She's concentrating like she's performing at Carnegie Hall. He chuckled softly. She gets that from me. And the smile. He paused. Her mother. Lydia's heart tightened at the quiet reverence in his voice. She said nothing more, Just watch the stage lights flicker over two lives that had both lost and learned to keep going. After the recital, the gym emptied slowly. Lydia packed up her trays, feeling the familiar loneliness creep back. Then she heard tiny footsteps. "Miss Lydia?" Ella's voice. "Can we take some cupcakes home? Daddy says yours are better than the store kind." Lydia laughed softly. "You can take two." Ethan appeared behind his daughter, hands in his pockets. "You're setting the bar high for store-bought frosting." "Good," Lydia said. They needed competition. He hesitated, as though wanting to ask something more. "Would you consider, well, my company's holding a charity dinner next month. We could use a baker with heart." She blinked. "I haven't done anything that fancy." "Neither have I lately." Their smiles met, awkward but real. "I'll think about it," she said. As she walked out into the cold evening, she heard his son call after her, "Bye, Miss Cupcake." She laughed into the wind. For the first time in months, the word Barren didn't echo like a curse. It just sounded like the wrong definition. If you were Lydia, heartbroken but offered a second chance to use your gift again, would you risk opening your heart, or keep it guarded? Tell me below, what would you do? Lydia almost talked herself out of calling. 3 times she typed Ethan Cole's number, 3 times she deleted it. Then she remembered Ella's serious little face and Noah's frosting-covered smile and finally pressed dial. "Mr. Cole? It's Lydia Moore. About the charity event, you still need a baker." A pause, a smile audible through the line. "I was hoping you'd call." The next morning, she stepped into Cole Enterprises carrying a tray of sample pastries and all the nerves she could hide under lipstick. The lobby gleamed, glass, marble, and quiet money, but the receptionist greeted her warmly. Ethan appeared moments later, tie loosened, sleeves rolled to his elbows. "You actually came," he said, surprised and relieved all at once. "I said I'd think about it." "I did. Then I decided cupcakes beat unemployment." He laughed. "Good decision." He led her to the conference room. The gala's next month. Theme, Building Brighter Beginnings. It's a fundraiser for the children's wing at St. Anthony's Hospital. Lydia set down her tray. "Then the desserts should taste like hope." He blinked. "That's poetic." "Bakers are closet poets," she said. "We just write in icing." When he tried one of her lemon cream tartlets, he actually closed his eyes. "This could end wars," he murmured. She grinned. "Then we'll start with the hospital." Over the next few weeks, meetings turned into shared mornings. She'd arrive with sketches of cake designs. He'd bring coffee and an opinion no one had asked for. "Too much gold dust," he'd say. "It's edible shimmer. It looks like a disco ball." "Children love disco balls," she'd counter, and he'd surrender, smiling. Sometimes Ella and Noah came after school, running through the office halls. They'd end up at Lydia's table, stealing frosting samples. Noah announced one afternoon, mouthful of buttercream, "Miss Lydia should make our birthday cakes forever." Ethan looked over the top of his laptop, watching the easy laughter between them. Something unfamiliar tugged in his chest, peace. One evening, as they wrapped up the tasting menu, snow began falling outside the tall windows. The city softened under it, the way hearts soften when no one's pretending anymore. "Stay until it slows," he said. "Traffic's chaos." Lydia hesitated. "I don't want to keep you from your kids. They're at my sister's tonight. Movie marathon." He poured tea instead of wine. They sat across from each other, steam curling between them. "You always this hands-on with charity dinners?" she asked. He shrugged. "It was Claire's idea originally. She believed giving meant more when you were part of it." Lydia nodded. "She sounds kind." "She was sunshine and noise," he said quietly. Then she was gone, and the house forgot how to laugh. Lydia's eyes softened. "You're doing your best, Ethan. Some days it doesn't feel like enough. Then you keep showing up until it does." Their gazes met, the air thick with understanding. For a heartbeat neither looked away. The next week, disaster struck. A supplier canceled, leaving her short on ingredients days before the event. Lydia stared at her phone, panic creeping in. Flour, sugar, specialty chocolate, gone. Then a message popped up. Don't panic. Check your doorstep. EC. She opened the door to find boxes neatly stacked, everything she needed, same-day delivery. She called him immediately. You can't just rescue people with money. I didn't, he said. I rescued cupcakes with logistics. You're impossible. I've been called worse. She laughed despite herself. Thank you. His voice softened. You don't have to thank me, Lydia. You're the one bringing sweetness back into this house. The night before the gala, she went to his home to finalize arrangements. The mansion was grand but lived in, children's drawings framed in the hallway, a faint smell of cinnamon from some long-ago breakfast. Ella opened the door. Miss Lydia. Daddy burned dinner. Ethan appeared, sheepish. I was experimenting with lasagna. You were experimenting with smoke, Lydia teased. She tied an apron around her waist. Step 1, chef, order pizza. They laughed until Noah joined, clapping his flour-covered hands. The kitchen filled with warmth louder than any music. When the children finally went to bed, Lydia wiped the counter. You have good kids. They have a good woman teaching them kindness tonight, he said. She froze, heart stuttering. He added softly, You remind me that joy can walk back into a room even after loss. She looked up. Joy and grief share walls sometimes. That's how healing sneaks in. They stood there, the clock ticking, something unspoken but alive stretching between them. The next evening glowed with candlelight and laughter. Lydia's desserts were the centerpiece, delicate sugar sculptures of wings and stars. Guests murmured praise, photographers snapped pictures. Ethan watched from across the room, pride in his eyes that had nothing to do with profit. When she caught his gaze, she mouthed, Thank you. He shook his head. No, thank you. Later, during the closing speech, he invited her on stage. This event raised a record amount tonight, he said, voice steady. But more than that, it reminded me what generosity looks like. It looks like someone who believes small things still matter. He gestured toward her. This is Lydia Moore, the heart behind tonight's light. Applause thundered. Lydia blinked back tears, humbled and seen for the first time in years. After everyone left, the hall stood empty but for the two of them. He turned to her. You changed this place. Maybe it just needed frosting, she joked, but her voice trembled. He smiled. Or maybe it needed you. The lights dimmed, snow began falling outside again, soft as a blessing. If you were Lydia, learning to trust kindness after heartbreak, would you believe a man's gentle words, or would the past still whisper too loudly? Tell me in the comments which voice you'd listen to. The night of the gala lingered in Lydia's mind like the aftertaste of something too sweet to last. Every compliment, every applause, every glance from Ethan had felt like sunlight after years of rain. But sunlight, she reminded herself, always fades. She washed frosting bowls in her small apartment kitchen, humming to keep the silence away. Her phone lit up once, Ethan's name, and she let it ring until it stopped. She told herself it was better that way. Across town, Ethan sat in his study staring at a half-written thank you email. Dear Lydia, I just wanted to say. He deleted it, ran a hand through his hair. What would he even say? That her laugh still echoed through the house? That his daughter had started pretending to bake just to be like Miss Lydia? He closed the laptop. Don't do this again, he muttered to himself. You promised. On the shelf behind him, Claire's photograph smiled out from the frame. The weight of old promises pressed hard against new feelings he wasn't ready to name. A week passed without a word. The charity account settled, press articles praised the success, and Lydia's inbox filled with catering inquiries. Still, none of them felt right. Every order she accepted felt mechanical, as if she were stirring batter without purpose. When Ella showed up at the bakery door after school, clutching a crumpled napkin note, Daddy forgot his lunch again. Please tell him to eat something, Lydia's heart twisted. She made 2 sandwiches, tucked one into the child's backpack, and asked gently, How's your dad? He smiles less, Ella said. But he plays piano again. That's good, right? Lydia nodded, blinking away an unexpected sting of tears. That's very good. That evening, Ethan arrived at the bakery. He stood in the doorway, awkward and out of place among the pastel walls and the smell of sugar. You didn't have to come, she said before he could speak. I owed you lunch. And an apology. For what? For disappearing. She shrugged. You don't owe me anything. We worked together. It's over. That's not true, he said quietly. Lydia looked away. You're a client, Ethan. A kind one, but still a client. I thought maybe a friend, he said. That's the problem. Her voice cracked on the last word. She busied herself with the mixer, pretending she didn't notice his disappointment. He hesitated, then said softly, Claire used to say people run hardest right before they're found. She froze. I'm not running. Then why are you out of breath? The mixer hummed between them, a noisy cover for everything they didn't know how to say. A few days later, Lydia overheard two vendors whispering outside her shop. She's the one from that coal gala, right? Lucky woman. Must have charmed her way into those contracts. Widower's pet project, more like. The words cut deeper than she expected. She turned away, pretending not to hear. That evening she drafted a polite email. Mr. Cole, I appreciate everything you've done, but I'll be stepping back from future events. It's time I focus on my own clients. She hit send before her heart could object. When Ethan read her message, anger and confusion tangled in his chest. He dialed her number, but it went to voicemail. So he drove to the bakery instead. She looked up, startled, as he pushed through the door. Why are you quitting? I'm not quitting, she said evenly. I'm choosing boundaries. Because of gossip? Because I can't be someone's pity project. His eyes darkened. Is that what you think this is? I don't know what to think, she said, voice shaking. Every time someone gets close, it turns into charity. I can't do that again. He took a step closer. Lydia, this isn't charity. It's... Don't. Her tone was firm now. Whatever you're about to say, don't. Because if you mean it, I'll believe you, and I can't survive being wrong again. He stopped cold. Silence filled the small shop, thick as flour dust. Finally he said quietly, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm not ready for this either. He left before she could reply. The door closed with a sound that felt final. The week that followed stretched endlessly. Lydia threw herself into work. Orders piled up, success, on paper, returned. But each evening, she caught herself setting 2 cups of tea instead of 1, and she'd laugh sadly at her own habit. Ethan buried himself in business again. Meetings, travel, deadlines, anything to drown the echo of her voice. At night he'd check on his sleeping children and whisper, "You deserve more than a father afraid of love." But he wasn't ready to fix it. Not yet. One afternoon, Ella found a cupcake box on their doorstep. Inside, written in icing, "Tell your dad to eat something." No signature, but the message was enough. Ethan smiled for the first time in days. He didn't text or call, he simply placed the empty box on his desk, a quiet reminder that some things weren't over, they were just waiting. You were Lydia, haunted by rejection but sensing new love. Would you trust it enough to stay, or walk away before you could be hurt again? Tell me below which choice your heart would make. Spring arrived early that year, washing Chicago in pale sunlight and the smell of rain. Lydia told herself she'd moved on. She baked, she smiled. She even started teaching a Saturday class for kids at the local community center. Life, in all its messy sweetness, was finding her again. Then one Saturday morning, she looked up from a tray of cooling muffins and saw a familiar pair of small hands stealing one. "Noah Cole," she gasped. He froze mid-bite, eyes wide, then grinned through crumbs. "You said these were for everyone." "I said for everyone after they cooled," she corrected, laughing despite herself. "What are you doing here?" "Daddy signed us up for your class," said Ella, walking in behind her brother with a confident little shrug. And then there he was, Ethan, standing in the doorway, holding a volunteer badge. "I didn't know this was your class," he said, though the smile tugging at his mouth gave him away. "Of course not," Lydia replied dryly, wiping her hands on her apron. Total coincidence. For the first 10 minutes, it was chaos. Flour on the counter, sugar everywhere, 2 giggling children arguing about whose cupcakes were prettier. Ethan tried to help, but mostly ended up covered in icing. Lydia kept her focus on the kids, determined not to look at him, until he leaned close to whisper, "I think I just invented frosting glue." She turned. His hands were sticky, his tie ruined, his grin boyish. She burst out laughing, the sound catching both of them off guard. "You're impossible," she said between chuckles. "Persistent," he corrected. "There's a difference." When class ended and the kids ran off to the park, Lydia stayed behind to clean. Ethan lingered, drying trays beside her. "You didn't have to help," she said. "I know," he replied. "But I wanted to." Silence stretched, not heavy this time, just real. Finally, he said, "I heard what people said about you. About us. I should have defended you." Lydia shook her head. "You didn't owe me that." "I did," he said quietly. "You were brave enough to stand beside me when everyone else only saw headlines. And I hid." She stopped wiping. "Why?" He set the towel down. "Because I was afraid. Loving you felt like betraying her." Her chest tightened. "Ethan." He met her gaze. "And walking away felt like betraying myself." The room went still except for the hum of the old fridge. She took a slow breath. "You don't have to decide anything now," she said softly. "Healing isn't a deadline." He smiled faintly. "You sound like my therapist." "Smart man," she teased. He laughed, and the air between them warmed again. A week later, the community center planned a charity fair. Lydia was in charge of the bake stall. Ethan volunteered for logistics. The kids, of course, saw it as destiny. "See, Miss Lydia," Ella said, tugging her apron. "You and Daddy make a good team." Lydia smiled nervously. "Do we?" Noah nodded. "You make cupcakes. He eats them. Perfect team." Ethan overheard, chuckling. They might be onto something. The day of the fair, rain poured unexpectedly. Power flickered, vendors panicked, and the bake tent flooded halfway through setup. Ethan found Lydia kneeling in puddles, moving trays to higher ground. "Go home," she said, drenched. "You'll catch a cold." "Not without you," he said simply, grabbing boxes. They worked side by side, soaked but laughing, the storm beating around them. By the time they relocated to the main hall, both looked like survivors of a desert apocalypse. "Next time," Lydia said, "remind me to pick indoor events." He smiled. "Next time, I'll bring umbrellas and better excuses." When the fair ended, volunteers gathered for cleanup. The kids fell asleep on a bench, heads leaning together. Ethan covered them with his jacket and turned to find Lydia watching. "They trust you," he said softly. "I think they just trust cupcakes," she joked, then added, "but I love them, you know. Not because they're yours, because they're themselves." Something in his expression softened. "They love you too." She looked down, blinking fast. "Don't say that unless you mean it." "I do," he said. "Every word." She swallowed hard. "I don't know how to do this, Ethan. Every time I start to care, I think about all the ways it can fall apart." He stepped closer but didn't touch her. "Maybe it's not about falling apart. Maybe it's about building something strong enough to survive it." Her voice trembled. "And what if I can't give you everything you deserve?" He shook his head. "You already give us what we need, peace. You don't have to fill a space that isn't yours to fill." Their eyes met, and for once, neither looked away. He drove her home that night. The kids slept in the back seat, city lights streaking across the windows. Halfway there, Lydia spoke quietly. "You know, I used to pray for a family. I thought it would come one way. Turns out, maybe it's coming another." Ethan glanced at her, emotion raw in his eyes. "You already are family, Lydia. You just haven't seen it yet." She smiled sadly. "Maybe one day I will." They didn't speak again, but the silence between them was no longer distant. It was comfortable. When he dropped her off, she leaned down to check on the sleeping kids, brushed a crumb from Noah's cheek, then turned back to Ethan. "Good night," she whispered. He nodded. "Good night, Lydia." She hesitated. "And thank you, for the umbrellas and the excuses." He smiled. "For you, I'll keep making both." If you were Lydia, pulled between fear and the quiet pull of something real, would you let the walls finally fall, or keep them up a little longer? Tell me what your heart would do. The next few weeks passed in the soft rhythm of the new routine. Ethan dropped by the community center often under the pretext of helping with deliveries, but everyone knew better. Even the volunteers had started to tease Lydia. "He's not here for cupcakes, dear." She'd laugh it off, but every time she saw him walk through those glass doors, her pulse betrayed her. Still, she kept her distance. Some secrets weren't meant for daylight. One quiet Thursday evening, after the last class had gone, Ethan lingered. They packed away baking trays and folded aprons in comfortable silence until Lydia said, without looking up, "You never talk about her much." He paused. "Claire." She nodded. He leaned against the counter, staring at the worn wooden floor. She was everything loud that I wasn't. She could fill a room just by laughing. And then suddenly, the house went quiet. Lydia said softly, "Cancer." He nodded. "Leukemia. 2 years of fighting." She made me promise I'd let the kids remember her with joy, not pity. But every time they laughed, I heard guilt instead. Her heart clenched. "You did what you could." He met her gaze. "I didn't. I drowned in work, left her sister to handle the hospital. I couldn't watch her fade. And when she died, I told myself I was doing it for the kids. Truth is, I was hiding." Lydia stepped closer, resting her hand lightly on the counter between them. "Grief doesn't follow rules, Ethan. It's not a weakness to survive the only way you know how." He studied her face, the quiet strength, the empathy. "You make it sound simple." "It isn't," she said. "But it's human." He hesitated, then said, "And you? What's the story you never tell?" She froze, fingers tightening around a tea towel. "Some things are better left in the past. Sometimes the past loses power when you say it out loud." For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the fridge and distant rain. Finally she said, "Dean, my ex, left me because I couldn't give him a child." Ethan's breath caught. Lydia continued quietly, "We tried for years. Doctors, tests, prayers. Then one day he said he wanted a family, and I wasn't enough for that dream. He walked away, and a month later, his new wife was pregnant." She gave a brittle laugh. "Guess it proved his theory, right?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "It proved he was a coward." She blinked, surprised by the anger in his tone. He stepped closer. "You loved him, and he turned that love into a condition. That's not family, Lydia. That's a contract." Her eyes glistened. "You say that like it's easy to unhear the things he said." "I don't think it's easy," he said. "I just think you deserve to hear something truer." He held her gaze until she had to look away. A week later, Lydia was walking home from the center when a familiar voice stopped her. "Lydia." She turned, and the world tilted. Dean stood on the sidewalk, tailored suit, wedding band glinting. Same confident smirk. "Didn't think I'd run into you here," he said. "Still baking." She crossed her arms. "Still talking like you invented charm?" He chuckled. "Feisty as ever. You look good. Happier, even." "I am," she said simply. "That's good," he said, stepping closer. "You deserved better than what we had. But I'll admit, seeing you with him, the millionaire? Nice rebound." Her stomach turned. "This isn't your business." He smiled thinly. "Just making sure you're not pretending again. You were always good at pretending." Before she could respond, a voice behind her said, "She doesn't have to pretend anymore." Ethan had arrived, calm but unyielding. Dean turned, eyes narrowing. Ah, the savior himself. Ethan didn't flinch. The man who actually sees her. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. Dean shrugged. "Enjoy your charity case, Mr. Cole." He walked away, leaving the sour smell of arrogance behind him. Lydia's hands shook. "I didn't know he was back in town." Ethan said quietly, "You don't owe him a reaction." But her voice cracked. "He reminded me what I was. What I can't be." Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're not defined by what you can't give, Lydia. You're defined by what you do give. Kindness. Strength. Love." Her tears came then, silent, unstoppable. He hesitated, then reached out, brushing one away with his thumb. You have nothing to prove to anyone, least of all him. She closed her eyes, breathing unevenly. Thank you. For what? For seeing me. That night, they sat outside the community center on the old stone steps, watching rain streak across the streetlights. Do you ever think about what healing actually means? Lydia asked quietly. Ethan nodded. It's not forgetting. It's remembering without the pain of winning. She smiled faintly. Then maybe I'm halfway there. He looked at her, something gentle and certain in his eyes. You're further than you think. They didn't speak again, but the silence between them felt different now, no longer hiding anything, just holding space for what could finally grow. If you were Lydia, facing someone who once broke you, would you stand tall, or would the old wounds still speak louder than your healing? Tell me below how you'd face your past. Spring slipped quietly into early summer. The air was softer, the days longer, and the distance between Lydia and Ethan, once thick with fear, had become something else entirely, a bridge. It started small. A morning text from Ethan, "The kids miss your muffins." Her reply, "Tell them muffins miss them too." Then a photo, Noah covered in flour, Ella holding a mixing spoon like a sword. Soon, visits to the community center became regular again. Sometimes they stayed long after everyone had gone, cleaning up together, talking about nothing and everything. Healing, Lydia realized, didn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrived with laughter over spilled cocoa. One bright Sunday, Ethan invited her and the kids to the park. It's not fancy, he said, but the chef's specialty is peanut butter sandwiches and questionable lemonade. She smiled. Perfect. They spread a blanket under an oak tree. Ella practiced cartwheels. Noah built crumb castles. Lydia watched as sunlight softened Ethan's features. Without the suit, without the boardrooms, he looked 10 years younger, and maybe freer. You look at peace, she said. He chuckled. That's because this lemonade is 90% sugar. She laughed, shaking her head. No. It's because you're happy. He looked at her for a long moment before saying softly, maybe I'm remembering how. Her heart did a quiet somersault. When the kids ran off to chase bubbles, Ethan turned to her. You know, after Claire died, I thought I was done. That any kind of love would feel like betrayal. And now I think betrayal is staying frozen when life's trying to move again. She looked down at her hands. It's hard to move when you're afraid of breaking what's finally whole. Then maybe we learn to move carefully. Together. She met his eyes. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, he said, smiling. It's just worth it. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Lydia baked on Sunday mornings, and Ethan would stop by for quality control. The children followed her around the kitchen like ducklings, learning how to measure sugar and patience at the same time. One afternoon, Noah looked up at her and asked, Miss Lydia, are you my almost mom? Lydia froze. What do you mean, sweetheart? Daddy says you make the house feel full again. That's what moms do, right? Her throat tightened. I guess it is. When she told Ethan later, she expected him to look uncomfortable. Instead, he smiled, quiet and grateful. They're not wrong. She blushed, pretending to focus on her cupcake tray. Careful, Mr. Cole. That almost sounded like a compliment. Almost. Almost. One evening, the power went out during a summer storm. Lydia was at the Cole house helping the kids with their homework when the lights flickered off. Oh! Noah shouted. Ethan lit candles while Lydia found a flashlight. Looks like we're going old school, he said. Ella grinned. Can we tell ghost stories? No ghosts, Lydia said firmly. But maybe music? She spotted the piano in the corner. Who plays? Claire used to, Ethan said. I haven't touched it since. Maybe tonight's the night, she whispered. He hesitated, then sat down. The first notes were hesitant, unsure. But soon, melody filled the dark room, a piece slow and tender, full of memory. Lydia joined him softly, humming the tune. Ella and Noah curled up on the couch, eyes drooping, the storm outside fading into rhythm. When the last note faded, she said quietly, that was beautiful. It was hers, he said. Then it's yours now too. He looked at her, candlelight flickering across his face. You really think love can live twice? I think love never dies, she said. It just learns new names. The silence after that was deep and safe. The next morning, Lydia woke to a knock on her door. Outside was a small potted plant with a note. For the one who brings things back to life. E.C. She smiled so hard it hurt. From that day on, the plant sat on her kitchen windowsill, growing greener every week. A symbol of something neither of them had dared to name, but both were tending carefully. One Saturday, Ethan invited her to dinner with his sister, Maya. Lydia spent the whole drive convincing herself it wasn't a big deal. But when Maya opened the door, she smiled knowingly. So this is the woman who makes my brother leave the office on time. Lydia flushed. I promise I only bribe him with sugar. Smart strategy, Maya laughed, ushering her in. Dinner was easy. Maya's laughter filled the room, the kids chattered, and Ethan looked more relaxed than Lydia had ever seen him. After dessert, Maya pulled Lydia aside. He's smiling again because of you. Don't run when it gets real, okay? Lydia blinked. Why would I? Because you both look like people who've been broken once. Just, don't let fear decide. Lydia nodded, heart full and aching all at once. When Lydia got home later, she found a text waiting. Thank you for tonight. For everything. She replied, you're welcome. For what it's worth, I think you're learning to live again beautifully. A moment later, another message arrived. Only because you showed me how. She smiled, placing her phone beside the little plant. Its leaves glistened under moonlight, alive, growing, steady. If you were Lydia, slowly learning that love can be gentle after pain, would you take the leap, or would you still wait for the perfect moment? Tell me below what love means to you when it finally feels safe. Love, Lydia had learned, was fragile not because it was weak, but because it was real. And real things could break. For a few weeks, everything had been peaceful. She and Ethan worked together easily, the kids treated her as family. The plant on her windowsill was now blooming tiny white flowers. Then came the magazine article. It wasn't even true, just a glossy headline in a local lifestyle column. Widowed CEO Ethan Cole finds comfort in former baker, sources say engagement near. Her name, her photo beside his, the words gold digger turned social climber, tucked casually in the second paragraph. Lydia's heart sank as she read it. Not because she believed the gossip, but because she knew how the world loved to twist a woman's worth into scandal. Her phone buzzed that morning with messages from friends and students. Lydia, did you see this? Tell me it's a lie. You okay? By the time Ethan called, her hands were shaking. Lydia, I'm so sorry, he said immediately. I didn't know they were writing that. It's a mess. I'll have my team issue a correction. She exhaled, gripping the counter. You can't control people's mouths, Ethan. I can protect you from them. That's not protection, she said quietly. That's control in a nicer suit. He hesitated. That's not what I meant. But that's what it feels like. Her voice cracked. Do you know what it's like to finally be seen as more than what you can't give, only to have the world reduce you again? Lydia. I need space, she whispered. Just for a while. He didn't argue. That somehow hurt more than if he had. Days turned into a fog of silence. Lydia stopped going to the community center, claiming exhaustion. Ethan kept himself busy at work, convincing everyone, except himself, that it was fine. The kids didn't understand. Did we do something wrong? Ella asked him one night. He knelt to her level. No, sweetheart. Adults just get confused sometimes. Then fix it, she said simply. You fix things for everyone else. He smiled sadly. Some things need time, not fixing. One rainy afternoon, Lydia ducked into a grocery store for flour. She nearly dropped the bag when she saw a familiar figure in the next aisle, Ethan's sister Maya. Lydia. Maya hurried over, concern etched across her face. I've been trying to call you. Lydia tried to smile. I didn't want to cause more chaos. Chaos. Maya frowned. That article was trash. Everyone who matters knows that. But Ethan, she hesitated. He's shutting down again. Just like after Claire. Lydia's chest ached. He shouldn't have to explain me. Maybe not, Maya said softly. But he needs you to remind him that love isn't something he has to apologize for. Lydia blinked back tears. And what if I remind him and he decides he doesn't want it after all? Then at least you'll know you didn't let fear make the choice. That night, Ethan sat in his study, the rain outside matching the storm inside him. The magazine still lay on his desk. He'd read it once, burned with anger, and then stared at it far too long. Claire's picture sat nearby. He found himself whispering, I thought I could protect them all. But maybe love doesn't want armor, it wants honesty. Down the hall, Noah's small voice carried through the quiet. Daddy, when's Miss Lydia coming back? Ethan's throat tightened. I don't know, buddy. Can we call her? He hesitated, then shook his head. Not tonight. But long after the children slept, he sat awake, phone in hand, scrolling to her contact, hovering over call and never pressing it. A week later, Lydia showed up at his office. No warning, no text. Just a knock and then the door opening. He looked up, startled. Lydia. We need to talk, she said. He gestured to the chair. Please. She didn't sit. That article, it wasn't your fault. But you didn't fight for me either. His jaw tightened. I was trying not to make it worse. Sometimes silence makes it worse. He stood, crossing the room slowly. I thought if I kept quiet, it would die down. But you didn't keep quiet for you, Ethan. You kept quiet for them, the investors, the image, the world. You made me invisible again. He closed his eyes. You're right. I was scared. I've lived half my life trying to be the man people expect. I didn't know how to be the one you need. Her voice softened. I never asked for perfection. I just needed you to believe in us enough to stand there with me. He reached for her hand, but she pulled back. I can't keep doing this dance where I'm almost enough, she whispered. You have to decide, Ethan. Are you ready to love someone living, or are you still loving a memory? The question hung heavy in the air. He said nothing. And sometimes, silence is the loudest answer. That night, Lydia packed the little plant from her windowsill into a box. Its leaves trembled in the draft, fragile but still green. She placed it by the door and whispered, I hope you survive this better than I did. Outside, the city lights blurred through tears she refused to let fall. At home, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, the house unnaturally quiet. Ella's small drawing hung on the wall, a stick family holding hands, labeled Daddy Me Noah Miss Lydia. He stared at it until his chest hurt. Min Su's voice from an old conversation echoed in his head. You spend your life fixing things that don't bleed. But hearts do, and you can't fix what you won't face. He finally understood. This wasn't about public opinion or image, it was about fear. And he'd let fear win again. If you were Lydia, tired of being almost enough, would you walk away completely, or give love one more chance to prove it's real? Tell me below which choice you'd make when trust breaks. The next week stretched like a quiet ache. Neither of them spoke, but both felt the absence as surely as breath itself. The plant Lydia had given back sat on Ethan's windowsill, wilting despite his careful watering. He couldn't bring himself to throw it away. At night, he'd catch himself staring at the empty chair across the table, the one she used to fill with laughter, with light. And every time his children asked, when's Miss Lydia coming over again? He'd force a smile and say, soon. But soon never came. Lydia had taken a break from baking classes. Her kitchen felt too quiet, her heart too full of unfinished sentences. One evening, her friend Nora dropped by, bringing groceries and blunt honesty. You look miserable, she said, unpacking apples. I'm fine, Lydia lied. You're terrible at lying, Nora said. You miss him. Lydia folded her arms. Missing him doesn't fix the fact that he didn't stand by me. Nora studied her. Maybe not. But holding on to pride won't fix it either. Lydia sighed. He has a whole world to protect. Businesses, reputation, expectations. I'm just me. Nora smiled gently. Exactly. You're you. The woman who makes people feel home. Maybe that's worth more than his whole world. That same night, Ethan sat at his desk, surrounded by silence. The magazine lay in the trash, the plant half alive on the sill. He scrolled through old photos, Claire and the kids, Lydia and the cupcakes, Lydia laughing when frosting covered her nose. He realized the guilt he'd carried for years wasn't about losing Claire, it was about being afraid to live after her. And for the first time, he said her name out loud. "Claire," he whispered. "Thank you for loving me enough to want me happy again." The words felt like release. He picked up his phone and typed a message, but didn't send it. Instead he stood, grabbed his coat, and drove. Across town, Lydia sat on her couch, holding her phone too. She typed, "I'm sorry too." Deleted it. Typed again, "I hope you're okay." Deleted that too. Then she whispered quietly, "Why can't love ever be simple?" Her eyes landed on the empty spot where the plant had sat. It felt like an echo of herself, something once rooted, now displaced. She stood abruptly, grabbed her keys, and left. The universe, it seemed, was tired of waiting. It was raining lightly when Lydia crossed the park, their park, where picnics and laughter had once lived. She stopped under the oak tree, remembering every word he'd said there, "Maybe we learn to move carefully. Together." Headlights cut through the mist, and she turned just as Ethan stepped out of his car, equally drenched and breathless. "Lydia." She froze. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same." She half laughed, half cried. "Maybe we're both crazy. Maybe we both finally stopped running." They stood there, rain pooling around their feet, the city a blur behind them. Ethan spoke first. "You were right. I let fear make my choices. Fear of losing, fear of judgment, fear of not being enough for you." "You were enough," Lydia said softly. "You just didn't believe it." He nodded. "I thought loving you meant erasing the past. But I see now, it means honoring it by moving forward." Tears slipped down her cheeks, mingling with rain. "Ethan, I can't be someone's shadow. I need to be seen for me." He stepped closer, voice breaking. "You are. You always were. I just needed to open my eyes." She hesitated. "And what about the world? The rumors? The stares?" He smiled sadly. "Let them talk. They talked when Claire and I built a life from nothing. They'll talk now too. The difference is, this time, I know what I'm fighting for." Her breath caught. "And what's that?" "You," he said simply. "And the family that feels like home again." She looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "Do you remember what I told you once? That love never dies, it just learns new names." He nodded. She smiled through tears. "I think I finally know what I meant." He laughed softly, relief flooding his voice. "Then teach me. Because I'm still learning how to do this right." She took his hand, fingers trembling. "Start by believing we deserve it." He squeezed her hand gently. "We do." They drove back in silence, not the heavy kind this time, but the kind filled with understanding. When they reached his house, Ella and Noah were waiting on the porch, pajamas and hope in their eyes. "Miss Lydia." Noah shouted, running toward her. Lydia knelt, arms open. "Hey, sweetheart." Ella looked up at Ethan. "Does this mean we're a family again?" Ethan glanced at Lydia, who smiled and said, "I think it means we're finally ready to try." The kids cheered, wrapping their arms around both of them. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan Cole let himself feel completely at peace. If you were Ethan or Lydia, standing in the rain with a choice between pride and love, what would you choose? Could you forgive and start again? Tell me below how you'd find your way back to love. Morning came soft and golden, as if even the sun had decided to forgive. For the first time in months, Ethan woke to the sound of laughter echoing down the hallway. Lydia's voice, gentle, amused, mingled with the children's chatter and the clatter of spoons against bowls. He stood in the doorway, taking in the scene. Lydia wore one of his aprons that was far too big for her. Noah was proudly stirring batter while Ella supervised like a tiny executive. "Careful," Lydia warned. "We're making pancakes, not soup." Ethan smiled. "Looks perfect to me." She turned, startled, then smiled back. "Good morning." "Good morning," he said, and it felt like a beginning. Breakfast turned into a mess of flour and laughter. At one point, Noah announced, "If Miss Lydia lives here, we'll never run out of cupcakes." Lydia blushed. Ethan just said, "That sounds like a solid business plan." Later, when the kids ran off to build a pillow fort, he joined her at the sink. "I don't know what this is yet," she said quietly, "but it feels right." "It feels like home," he answered. She glanced up. "You're sure you're ready for that?" He dried a plate, smiled faintly. "I spent years being ready for everything except happiness. I think it's time I learned this too." That afternoon, they visited Claire's grave together. Ethan brought lilies, the kind she'd loved, and placed them gently on the grass. He spoke softly, not ashamed of the tears that came. "You told me once to keep living, to show the kids joy again. I didn't know how, until her." Lydia stepped forward, her hand finding his. "Thank you for sharing this with me." He turned toward her. "Thank you for helping me keep that promise." The wind rustled through the trees like a quiet blessing. Guilt loosened its grip. Grief finally found peace beside new love instead of in place of it. Weeks later, on a bright September afternoon, they gathered in the park under the same oak tree where they'd found each other again. It wasn't grand, just family, close friends, and a breeze carrying laughter. Ella scattered petals down the path. Noah proudly carried the rings. Lydia walked toward Ethan, simple white dress fluttering like a sigh of relief. When the officiant said, "Do you promise to love not for what's missing, but for what's here?" they both said, "We do." And everyone knew they meant it. Afterward, the children climbed into their arms shouting, "Finally!" Life settled into a rhythm stitched together by ordinary magic, mornings of burnt toast and giggles, evenings filled with homework and the smell of vanilla. Lydia reopened her bakery under a new name, Second Chance Sweets. Ethan helped with the business plan. She refused to let him pay for everything. "Partnership," she said. 50-50. He grinned. 40-60 in your favor. You make the frosting. On weekends, the family worked together at the shop. Customers often commented on the laughter spilling from the kitchen. No one saw scars anymore, only warmth. One quiet evening after closing, Lydia found an envelope taped to the bakery door. Inside was a short note, unsigned. "I read the article. I was wrong about you. You built something real. D." She stared at it for a long moment, then smiled and tucked it into the drawer marked past lessons. Forgiveness didn't mean returning to what broke you. It meant freeing yourself to love what didn't. A year later, on the anniversary of the hospital fundraiser, they hosted another gala, this time together. Reporters came again, but the story was different now. Baker and CEO turned loss into love, raising millions for children's care. When Lydia stepped on stage to thank the crowd, Ethan watched from the audience, pride and awe in his eyes. She ended her speech with words that summed up their journey. "Sometimes life takes away what we think defines us, only to give back what actually does. Love doesn't arrive perfect, it arrives willing." Applause filled the hall. Ethan's eyes met hers, and the past finally felt like a closed book. That night, after tucking the kids into bed, they sat on the porch, stars glimmering above. The little potted plant that had once wilted now stood tall between them, green and thriving. Ethan reached for her hand. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" She smiled. "Every day." He leaned closer. "And if I asked what happiness looks like now?" She looked at the plant, at the house glowing behind them, at the children's drawings on the walls. "It looks like this," she said. "Imperfect. Alive. Ours." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Then let's never stop choosing it." She whispered, "Deal." The night settled around them, quiet and complete. Two broken hearts that had finally found a rhythm that sounded like home. If you were Lydia, finally finding love not in perfection but in peace, what would you call home? Comment below. Is home a place, a person, or the feeling of being truly seen?
Thank you for staying with this story to the very end. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you'll never miss the next story of healing, hope, and unexpected love.